All right, it is time for another data comparison test. We're looking at 3 launch monitors today: the Rapsodo MLM2PRO, the Square Golf launch monitor, and the all-new FlightScope Mevo Gen2. We're going to put those up against the Trackman IO overhead launch monitor and looking at a few things today. First off, the balls used. We're going to use the Rapsodo Chrome Soft with their marked balls. We're looking at the TP5X from TaylorMade for the Square, and we're using the RCT balls from Titleist for the Mevo Gen2. For the data metrics, I'll spit these out quick and then we can get into what these actually mean. We're looking at horizontal launch angle, spin axis, spin rate, carry distance, and lateral direction, total distance offline. Gonna hit 7 shots with a wedge, 7 shots with a 7-iron, and 7 shots with a driver for each head-to-head comparison. That's 82 shots total. Gonna dive into that in just a second. Before we do, wanna make sure that these data points make sense. Obviously, carry distance and lateral direction offline is a result of the data that's being read. That data that we're looking at, the horizontal launch angle, if it's a degree left, we're gonna see a minus 1.0 on the spreadsheet later. If it's a degree right, that's a 1.0 on the spreadsheet. So negative is left, positive is right. And this is basically showing where the ball is starting a degree or 2 left of target or right of target. Next one is spin axis. This is going to show the rotational axis of the actual ball. If you're seeing a 0, that means it's only backspin. It's going perfectly straight. You're going to see 0 curvature of the ball. If you're seeing like a 3-point something on the spin axis, you might get a 5 to 10 yard draw or fade, depending on the direction. So this is really a measurement of the curvature of the ball and a very key point when trying to look at launch monitor data. It's also really hard to read. So I'm gonna put that one under a microscope today and really compare that to one of the best, which is Trackman. Last but not least, just the spin rate. We're gonna look at that as well as a benchmark. That's just measuring the revolutions per minute of the actual backspin of the ball. That paired with the spin axis is where we're gonna get our curvature. So now that we have that explained, let's get into the test. Let's go hit some golf shots. All right, checking in here, we're 2/3 of the way through. We're done with MLM2PRO, done with Square. I'm gonna get the Mevo Gen2 set up and hit those shots, and then looking forward to diving into the data. Looks pretty good so far with irons. Drivers have been a little bit dicey, but yeah, looking forward to dive in. Let's finish this up and get to it. Pull that these data tests have on your body. All right, last data point is in. We are done with golf shots for the day. I got a tournament in a couple days and it's raining and gross outside, so that was actually kind of useful to be able to do this. Let's get into the data. I'll jump into the office and start to sift through this and see what we've got. Let's do it. Okay, golf shots are complete. We are ready to look at the data. As a reminder, we are looking at pitching wedge, 7-iron and driver, for MLM2PRO, Square, and Mevo Gen2 against the Trackman IO. And today we are looking at carry distance, distance offline, horizontal launch angle, spin axis, and spin rate. As you can see on this screen capture, there are quite a bit of shots on here. One thing to note, again, I can cover this when we get to the Square, there was a misread on the wedge and the 7-iron. Again, we got all the drivers, but that was something that happened in the last test as well, so just something to note there. Starting with the MLM2PRO. So going down to the averages, actually before I get into this, we're gonna look at the averages of the MLM2PRO, Square, and Mevo Gen2 against the IO. We're also gonna look at this metric we covered last time called the mean average error, which is a fancy way of saying how far off of Trackman was it on average. So starting with the averages with MLM2PRO, carry distance slightly elevated. Not really looking at carry specifically for this test. This is more directional, but we wanted to include carry just as a reference point, since that's a number that so many people are familiar with. Carry was a little bit elevated. Side carry, this is a positive number, meaning I averaged 0.6 yards right of target. With IO, it was actually 3.6 right. Horizontal launch angle was 0.7 degrees right. That's the angular launch of the ball. Trackman was at 1.4 degrees. Then spin axis 0.7 degrees left versus negative 0.1 with Trackman. That's pretty close. And then the overall spin rate numbers look fairly close as well. Jumping down into the 7-iron, pretty similar results. We started to get into slightly more drastic differences, which we'll show in a second. The spin axis actually averaged the same. We'll see what the differential looked like, but the averages ended up being the same. And then the driver, this is where things got a little bit wacky. That's not uncommon with the higher ball speeds, something we're used to seeing. Launch angle was able to manage just fine. It's when you got into the spin rates and spin axis. As I mentioned before, spin axis is really tough. So on a $1,000, $1,500 launch monitor, it's going to be really difficult to compete with Trackman, obviously. There's a reason that comes with the price tag that it does. So this differential from Trackman for MLM2PRO. Big standouts here that I notice, the spin rate, that's very respectable with a wedge. Spin axis pretty close, launch angle pretty close. Some of this could be set up. I did the best I absolutely could to set up parallel between MLM2PRO and Trackman. That is tricky to get perfect, but just wanted to throw that out there. 7-iron, spin axis started to get a little further off, 1.4 degree average difference. There were also some shots where a slight draw showed as a slight fade, so that spin axis actually crossed over to the other side, which is pretty significant when you're trying to look at your ball flight. Again, launch angle, pretty good. We noticed that with the driver as well. Launch angle still really good. The spin axis was up to 2.7 off on the driver. So something we're gonna notice, MLM2PRO honestly was really good compared to the other launch monitors. But as you would probably expect to see, the spin rate and the spin axis start to get pretty dicey when the ball speeds jump up there. So without further ado, that was MLM2PRO. Let's look at square. Again, misread on the wedge, misread on the 7-iron. Those were cut from the averages, but that's something that we definitely want to call out. And then there was one shot where the spin axis was not recorded. Everything else was on the driver. So looking at the averages with square, I can glaze over some of this and jump back into the differential for Trackman. But a few things that stand out to me here are the spin axis being pretty good on the shorter clubs. The average was okay on the driver, but it starts to get very off on the differential to Trackman. And then it was coming across really spinny for me. I was hitting the TP5 Pix balls, and I think they were having some difficulties judging the backspin numbers. I even had one that was like 6,300 RPMs. The best 3 or 4 shots were closer, but there were a couple outliers that were pretty significant. I don't know if I can find that here that quickly, but yeah, here 64.87 on that spin rate, whereas the shot on Trackman read 25.05, so pretty significant there. And that happened a few times. The mean average error differential from Trackman, carry distance, side carry, I was reading a little bit further right for the most part. That was mainly because the horizontal launch angle was on average a degree right of Trackman, as was the spin axis with the wedge. The 7-iron read the same way. I'm actually thinking that I probably had this set up slightly off, because this is very comparable to the 7-iron, and then the launch angle was pretty comparable as well. We might have just been set up about a degree right of the Trackman's calibration. But a big call out here, spin rate and spin axis started to become pretty significantly off of the IO with Square using the TP5 Pix balls. So yeah, that wraps up Square. Similar to what we saw with the overall backspin and projectile numbers with Square. It was pretty good on the wedge and 7-iron, and then the driver struggled. Mevo Gen2, going to get a similar story here. So looking at those launch angle metrics, we have the horizontal launch angle very close, 0.3 right, and the spin axis 0.8 degrees right. That's the differential from Trackman again. Spin rate 104 with a wedge. That's pretty solid. We're talking about nearly 10,000 RPMs a spin, so 104 is pretty close. So in my opinion, Mevo was the definite winner on the wedge side of things. We'll give that one a quick highlight. Moving on to the 7-iron Mevo Gen2, we have, again, really good launch angle. Launch angle is not as hard to measure. This is kind of a calibration issue more than anything, but really good numbers here. Spin axis was up to 1.7 off with the 7-iron, and this is on approximately a 185-yard carry for me, so the ball speeds are getting upwards of 133 to 135, enough to pay attention to. Spin rate was dialed in with the RCT balls. That's really good with a 7-iron. That spin axis was the best with the Square, but all of these are fairly close. And then on the driver, started to see some issues on the spin axis side. So again, launch angle, pretty much perfect, 0.3 degrees off. We definitely see that significant difference of the spin axis with MLM2PRO. But this spin rate of 55 is incredible. That's gonna get your carry distance numbers dialed into an extremely accurate level. The spin axis is a little bit concerning. That's something that I want to definitely test more of and hit more shots with some longer clubs. If you're really trying to dial that in, MLM2PRO definitely had the best performance with the driver. And kind of across the board, pretty solid with the wedge and the 7-iron, but Mevo, similarly to the projectile metrics, Mevo was the clear winner with the wedge. A little bit more of a mixed bag with the 7-iron. Then I would say angular spin, definitely MLM2PRO was the winner here. And backspin numbers, Mevo Gen2 was light years ahead of the competition. So just a quick summary of my findings here. I think, yeah, this was a fun one. I think there's a lot more we can do with this. Feel free to drop a like, drop a comment if you want to elaborate on the test or have any questions for us. If you have other test ideas, I love doing this stuff, so would be happy to add it to the queue. And yeah, stay tuned for more. This was a fun one. Like and subscribe if you like the video, and we'll see you next time.